Everybody. So today's book is Persuasion by Jane Austen, and this is a book that I really wanted to like. So let's just start there. It's a book about Anne. Anne is she seems like kind of a normal girl. Like she's part of this very fancy family who, her dad's some, big wig in the aristocracy. They have a title, but they're not very rich, and her dad is really, just very caught up in being important, but he unfortunately has lost all his money because he is trying so hard to be important. And she has two older sisters, one of whom, the oldest, is Elizabeth. She is not married, and she just kind of hangs out with her dad. And then she has another sister named Mary, who's married, but she's kind of sickly and silly, and she just is kind of an annoying character. But anyway, the whole point of the story is that Anne, like 8 years ago, was seeing this guy who was in the Navy. His name is Captain Wentworth. We never really learned his first name that I'm aware of. So anyway, she and Captain Wentworth were a thing when she was like 22 or something. Anyway, so he wasn't rich at the time, and she's important in the aristocracy, so her family was all against it, and so she kind of said, this isn't gonna be a thing because my family's against it. And she was young, and she had her whole life ahead of her and everything, so she told him that she didn't want to marry him, and so he left, and became very rich and important. So you see all of that, you hear about all of that part of the story, kind of through the characters talking about it. And then when the story opens, it's been about 8 years later, as I said. She's like 27 or so. Anyway, and Captain Wentworth comes back, and he's rich because he shot down a lot of boats, and so he is an important person now, still not important in the aristocracy level, but anyway, he's at least rich and more respected, and he is hanging out with the families that are living around her, and her dad and sister moved to Bath. She's living in kind of the countryside, and they moved to Bath, which is a bigger city in England. And it may seem like I'm rambling on. That's because that's the problem with this book. So, as soon as these two characters are introduced, and you say, all right, Anne is, this person, and then she used to like Captain Wentworth, and Captain Wentworth is coming back, you know what's going to happen. You know that in the end, they're going to end up together. That's not a bad thing. Like, there are entire franchises that are built off of you knowing what's going to happen. Bugs Bunny is going to win out in the end against whoever he's fighting. That's not a problem. Knowing the ending is not a problem. It's how you tell the story, and if you can keep the interest up. What Jane Austen does to sort of fill in the story is the two characters do not interact, Captain Wentworth and Anne. Most of the time it's just extremely awkward with them. There's very little dialogue between them at all, which is realistic, okay? I'm not going to fault her necessarily for that. But one of the problems with that is that we don't really get to know Captain Wentworth at all, to be pulling for this union. I mean, we like Anne, so we want Anne to get what she wants. But at the same time, it would be nice if we knew that Captain Wentworth was a great guy. And honestly, at the end, based on some of the things he says at the end when, they get together, you're not really sure. And so it's like, But the other problem is that in order to fill up the book, which is admittedly very short for a book of this time period, she just has all this random stuff happen. It's like there's these little red herrings. Like, for instance, Anne gets involved with two different men during this time, and That would be fine, except that they kind of just pop up. Like the characters, you don't find any specific characters that you can grab hold of because characters are constantly moving in and out of the story. And so it would be better if there were other stories that were going on that you were as attached to, so we can pay attention to those stories while we have this big overarching story. But none of the characters are really worth getting attached to. Most of the characters are extremely self-indulgent, and they don't really care about anyone but themselves. So you're not really pulling for them to get married to any one person or to overcome anything. So in the end, you don't get attached to anyone in the story except Anne, and Anne's just kind of moving through this series of events that you don't really care too much about. So it just ends up being extremely unfocused, and you don't really get a sense of purpose in the book. There's nothing that I can say, oh, this is why the book was written. I can sort of say that it's to be written about this love story between Anne and Captain Wentworth, but to be honest, that is almost the least important thing. Like, it's the thing that is dwelled on the least. So it just ends up being very confusing to me. I'm sure there are many people who like Persuasion, but I just don't see it. Like, it's not a bad book. I couldn't put it on the bad list like I did Emma. I disliked Emma. I wanted to like Persuasion, and the more I kept going, the less that I could. So it's kind of like a people watching sort of book. If you want to read just sort of ramblings of a person's life, it's fine. It's like the equivalent of people watching, but it's not anything that's going to keep your interest or keep you excited. Unfortunately, I really wanted to like it, guys. So anyway, yeah, that's my opinions on Persuasion by Jane Austen. The next book that we're reading, we're about to go into a slew for like the next 5 or 6 books of books that I remember just loving. And the next book that I remember just loving is going to be The Phantom of the Opera. I'm so excited. So I'll get reading on that one and see you guys next time. Bye!